What are we discussing on today's Locked on Diamondbacks podcast? Let's discuss some trade scenarios for Jordan Montgomery and taking a look at the latest zip projections for the Dbacks in 2025.
You are Locked on Diamondbacks, your daily Arizona Diamondbacks podcast, part of the Locked on Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome into the Locked on Diamondbacks podcast, part of the Locked on Podcast Network, your team every day. You're listening to who? The always charismatic host of this podcast, Millard Thomas, multimedia journalist and a graphic designer. So please go check out my website, millardthomas24.myportfolio.com. On there, you can see my latest work, from my packages to my articles to my photos and my graphic design. Today's episode is brought to you by Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONMLB for $20 off your first purchase. On today's Locked on Diamondbacks podcast, we're going to discuss trade scenarios, teams that could be interested in Jordan Montgomery, the latest zip projections for the Dbacks, and then a little Slade Cecconi player review. Thank you for making Locked on Diamondbacks your first listen every day. I would not be able to do this podcast without you, my loyal listeners, sharing, subscribing, reviewing, doing all that so I could do this podcast for you. Thank you. It's free. It's available on all platforms, so please continue to tell your friends. And one of those platforms is YouTube. Please hit subscribe to Locked on Diamondbacks on YouTube. All right, now let's get into the Locked on Diamondbacks podcast. Do want to apologize if I sound a little weird. I am feeling under the weather right now, so my voice sounds a little off. I apologize, but let's discuss Jordan Montgomery and let's discuss some scenarios and teams that could be interested in him, because I think the D-backs coming out and saying they're going to eat potentially a ton of his salary, or at least the fact that they are willing to, makes Jordan Montgomery one of the hottest trade candidates on the market right now. I think Monty is going to be someone that is sought after by a lot of teams, and it already feels that way with Mike Hayden saying they're taking calls. People are calling in about Jordan Montgomery, and they should, because you look at Monty prior to 2024, 2023, 3.2 ERA, 2022, 3.4 ERA, and then 2021, a 3.83 ERA. This is someone that has gone better every single season the last 3 years, according to ERA, more innings pitched. This is someone that won a World Series against the Dbacks in 2023, where he was arguably the best starter in that rotation. And I think the 2024 season was just a weird year for Monty, where he came in out of shape, didn't get to start the year with the D-backs, like so many different variables that I think just didn't work out in Monty's favor. And I think Monty is a big bounce back candidate in 2025. And so there are a bunch of teams I think going to be interested in Montgomery. And I wrote down some teams I think should be interested in Montgomery, because I think these teams have a weakness or a hole, or I just think it makes sense with what their team's philosophy is. So I got 5 teams written down, and let's go through all 5 of those teams. First one is the New York Mets, who seem to be willing to add some salary and payroll to their budget this upcoming year after shedding some of those bad contracts. The last couple of years, the Mets might be in on a bounce back of Jordan Montgomery, especially considering guys like Sean Manaea is a free agent. I think Luis Severino also might be a free agent, but the rotation ceiling isn't super high right now. If you could get a Jordan Montgomery and actually get the good version out of him, I think the Mets would like to do that. Some rumors that maybe they would be interested in trading maybe like a Starling Marte or McNeil, but Marte is someone that D-backs fans are familiar with. We've seen him already in Arizona. He is in his mid-30s, probably not the same guy that we even saw a couple years ago in 2022 where he made an all-star team for the New York Mets. But considering looks like we could be losing Randall Grichuk and Jock Peterson, maybe like a Monty for Starling Marte trade isn't the worst idea in the world. But just look out for the New York Mets as one of those teams that could be looking to add to their roster this offseason, especially that rotation. Next up, how about the Atlanta Braves? They kind of did this last year with Chris Sale by taking a swing on him, and I think Jordan Montgomery could be another swing piece for Atlanta. Also, when you consider they might be losing one of their best pitchers in Max Fried going after Jordan Montgomery to replace him with a Chris Sale might be just what the doctor ordered for Atlanta. You get the bounce back out of Chris Sale in 2023. Can Atlanta do it again in 2025? Can you bring out all the juices of Jordan Montgomery that made him good in the past? Still got guys like Ronaldo Lopez in Atlanta. Still got Spencer Schwellenbach as well. So there's still other good pitchers in Atlanta as well. Even if a Max Fried leaves, I still think they like the depth that they have in their rotation, but they definitely need some more high-end, high upside talent. And Jordan Montgomery, again, if he hits that bounce back potential, could be a guy that is close to a frontline starter. So I could see the Atlanta Braves pulling the trigger on a guy like Jordan Montgomery. How about the Baltimore Orioles? I think they're interesting too because their best starter is also a free agent in Corbin Burns. And if he doesn't come back to Baltimore, what do they do, right? Their rotation is solid, but it's not great. Jordan Montgomery, if Corbin Burns leaves, could be perfect in that middle of the rotation, could definitely help out in terms of just getting some veteran guys who you feel like are trustworthy, right? If Jordan Montgomery bounces back, then you feel like he's trustworthy. But a lot of the other guys in the rotation, we love Grayson Rodriguez, but he's still trying to find his footing in the league, right? Albert Suarez was a breakout pitcher last year, but I don't know how confident you really feel in a lot of those Orioles pitchers. So I think a guy like Jordan Montgomery, who you may not have a lot of trust in right now, but again, if he bounces back for you in 2025, if you're Baltimore, that's like the perfect kind of pitcher that you need, especially if Corbin Burns leaves this free agency. That's going to be a major hole in your rotation. Don't know if you want to go another season where Cole Irvin is one of your most important guys, right? So maybe pulling the trigger on a guy like Jordan Montgomery could be perfect for Baltimore. How about here's another team? How about little Detroit Tigers? We saw them trade a guy in Jack Flaherty to the LA Dodgers, and Flaherty was a guy who you could look at like Jordan Montgomery, who was a buy low candidate entering 2024, had a major season with the Detroit Tigers. Maybe the Tigers want Jordan Montgomery. Maybe they also want Eduardo Rodriguez. Take back 2 D-back starters. Take back a guy they had recently. I don't think they want to do that, but Tigers are a team that won 86 games, made the postseason, and definitely need some help behind a Tariq Skubal. Reese Olson had a pretty good season, but once you traded Jack Flaherty, the rest of your rotation was kind of weak. Casey Mize, do I trust him? I don't know. I don't know. So a Jordan Montgomery in that rotation with a Skubal and a Reese Olson could be really, really nice for the Detroit Tigers, who already made a little bit of a run last year. Go and spend some money this free agency. Go add some talent to that roster after being a year too early with your expectations. And then who knows what kind of noise you can make in 2025. And then the final team I want to discuss in segment number one. How about the San Francisco Giants? This feels like a Giantsy kind of move where they go out and get the buy low Robbie Ray, get the buy low Carlos Rodon, Kevin Gosman. Like the Giants love those kind of pitchers. And I think Jordan Montgomery, the Alex Cobbs, the Del Scafanis, right? I think Jordan Montgomery fits the Giants mold perfectly of someone who's coming off a disappointing season, who you try to rehabilitate in your system, and then he goes out there, produces for you, and has a pretty good year. So I could see Jordan Montgomery becoming a San Francisco Giant target because I think he fits perfectly the philosophy of the type of guys that they like to go after. Now I want to discuss the D-backs projections for 2025 according to Zips in segment number 2. If you're looking to place a little wager down on an upcoming Arizona Cardinals game, then the best place to do that, of course, is going to be FanDuel, because get ready to tackle the NFL action with FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. Right now, new customers can bet $5 and get $150 in bonus bets if you win. The FanDuel Sportsbook app gives you everything you need to place live bets on the NFL all in one place. So when you get a hunch in the middle of the game, you can check out the latest stats, view live play-by-play, and so much more on the same page where you place your bets. Just visit FanDuel.com to join today. You'll get started with $150 in bonus bets if you win your first $5 bet. That's FanDuel.com. Never waste a hunch and make every moment more with FanDuel, an official sportsbook partner of the NFL. All right. Let's get back into the Locked on Diamondbacks podcast. Let's discuss the D-backs projections for 2025 according to Zips, because Zips has started to do their projections, and the D-backs were the first team that they did. And the D-backs, according to Zips, entering 2023, Zips was feeling kind of good about the D-backs, kind of optimistic, and I think the same is said for 2024, or excuse me, entering 2024. Zips was pretty optimistic about the D-backs, and I think entering 2025, the same is true. Now, Zips also knows they could be losing guys like Christian Walker and Jock Peterson, but even with that being said, I think Zips expects what a lot of D-backs fans expect. Maybe the offense comes down a little bit from being the best in the National League, but maybe the pitching staff gets a little bit better from being like one of the worst in the National League. And I think that's what Zips is projecting as well, because when you look at the lineup, obviously, if you're losing Jock Peterson, Randall Grichuk, Christian Walker, that's going to hurt. But from the rest of the guys, Zips doesn't see too much of a fall off. They expect Corbin Carroll to actually kind of get back to the levels he was closer to his rookie of the year, where he was like a top 5 MVP candidate, right? They love Gabriel Moreno. They love Geraldo Perdomo as guys that still have upside and still guys ascending on this D-backs roster. Marte, they still expect to be pretty much the same dude. Maybe a little bit of a decline they're expecting for Eugenio Lourdes Gurriel, but I think that wouldn't be a surprise at all, considering Eugenio is a guy that everyone has said has been declined the last few years. I don't think anyone would expect that to be different next year. Lourdes Gurriel is definitely a guy who can be up and down at times, so I wouldn't be surprised at all if he starts off slow or finishes the year slow. But if also Gurriel has like a 290 season, like that wouldn't surprise me either. And so Zips expects most of this lineup to be pretty similar to where it was the last year in terms of production. Maybe it doesn't have a ton of faith in like Adrian Del Castillo bouncing back, but it does like Pavin Smith more entering 2025 than opposed to years past. So there's give and take all up and down the lineup. It does have positive outlooks on Jordan Lawler, and it does see a little Gino Grover making some moves as well. And so Zips is in on this D-backs offense, at least being above average in the National League. Maybe he doesn't expect it to be elite once again, but you look at the numbers, always offensively, it feels like the numbers are going to be maybe more conservative or closer to like what you expect the average of like that player's career to be than maybe like a ceiling for a certain season, because entering 2025, when looking at the projected stats for these D-backs hitters, Corbin Carroll, like 21 home runs, 34 stolen bases, a 250 average, like an 800 OPS, like all really respectable numbers. A 98 RC, like Ketel Marte, it's like the same thing. 24 bombs, 82 ribbies. He's projected 270 average, like another just like around 800 OPS. Like all these numbers are pretty realistic and pretty like conservative. Like they're not expecting like superstar seasons from any one player from the D-backs, but kind of just doing what they have been doing the last couple of years, not expecting anyone to fall off in a major way. Yes, maybe some regression and decline for like the Eugenios and Lourdes Gurriels, but also some positive regression for like the Corbin Carrolls and the Gabriel Morenos and the Geraldo Perdomos. So for the most part, Zips is pretty favorable on this D-backs offense, the hitters, and they think they're just going to keep plugging along. The young guys are going to continue to improve, continue to get better. Older veterans maybe take a little bit of a decline, but they don't really expect this offense to be much different or any player to be much different than last year. But the pitching staff is where there's probably a little bit more discrepancy, because Zips, according to the numbers, feels like they're pretty in on a bounce back for this D-backs rotation entering next year. Because, of course, when you look at the D-backs numbers this past year and you look at the ERAs, like it was pretty disgusting to look at. Fott 4.71, Ryan Nelson 4.24, Gallon 3.65, Monty 6.23. Slade a 6.66 Illuminati. We'll talk about Slade in segment number 3. Kelly a 4.03 and Erod a 5.04, right? A lot of north of 4s, north of 5s, even some north of 6s mixed in there. But you look at the Zips projections for 2025, and like John Gruden would say, it's got me feeling nicey, because I don't mind these ERA projections. Zach Gallen, I think, could be a little bit better. or he could be a little bit worse, seeing how he's looked at times the last couple of years. But a 3.45 ERA for Zach Gallen, like I'm not mad at it. Brandon Pfaadt, a 3.84 ERA, I'm not mad at it. 3.87 ERA for Merrill Kelly, I think that could be a little bit better. A 4 flat for Ryan Nelson, I'm not upset at that. Jordan Montgomery, 3.93 ERA, and Erod 3.67. Like, yeah, if you're telling me the D-back starting five is Gallen, Fott, Kelly, Monty, and Erod, and all of them have ERAs sub 4, even if Monty's traded and Ryan Nelson's in the mix and his ERA's a flat 4, like, yeah, I would feel great about the D-backs rotation. I would feel like we would have one of the best rotations in baseball if that's the case. If we have 5 guys with the ERA 4 or below, yeah, and if Erod is back to put up a 3.6 ERA as our number 4 starter, yeah, I think Merrill Kelly would be better than a 3.87 ERA. So I actually think that number is probably a little bit too inflated for Merrill Kelly if he's healthy. And then Brandon Pfaadt, 3.84 ERA, like I would definitely take that. Sign me up for that if I'm Brandon Pfaadt. Then you look at the bullpen, and again, Zips, based off the projections, not looking too bad for the D-backs, because you look at like the top 5 guys for the D-backs coming out the pen. AJ Puck, 3.15 ERA. Justin Martinez, 3.11 ERA. Kevin Ginkel, 3.11 ERA. Ryan Thompson, 3.42. Joe Mantiply, 3.4. Like, we can definitely live if our top 5 is putting up numbers like that. Get another reliever or 2 this offseason. Like I've been saying, high leverage. Either Devin Williams or Ryan Hesley. Give me Clay Holmes. Give me Blake Trinian. Like, there's so many guys out there. Give me 1 or 2 more good relievers in this bullpen with how it already stacked up with those 5 guys that I feel pretty good about. And then throw in maybe a Gilbert Diaz internally. Maybe I don't know about Bryce Jarvis's health going to next year, or Dre Jameson. What's his health looking like, right? Cody develop Blake Walston into somebody, a Christian Mena. Like, I still think there's an internal option that the D-backs can still develop into a pretty good reliever for next year. And so just looking at the Zips projections right now for the D-backs, like, I'm pretty in on all of it. Yes, overall, might expect the offense to regress a little bit, but individually, it expects all the players to pretty much be pretty close to aligned to their career numbers. Meanwhile, they expect also the rotation to be closer to their career numbers. But with that being said, closer to their career numbers means all-star or close to all-star level seasons, because guys like Erod have been very good, and guys like Gallen and Kelly, we know, are studs. And so if the rotation does get back closer to the projections that Zips has for 2025, like, that is going to be one of the best rotations in the National League entering next year. So if Zips hits their projections, I would not be mad at all for the Arizona Diamondbacks. And now I want to talk about Slade Cecconi and the season he just had for the D-backs in segment number 3. But hey, if you're looking to purchase tickets to an upcoming Arizona Cardinals or Phoenix Suns game, then the best place to do that, of course, is going to be Game Time, because take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time picks. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONMLB for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account or redeem code LOCKEDONMLB for $20 off. Download Game Time today. What time is it? Game time. All right. Let's get back into the Locked on Diamondbacks podcast. And let's discuss Slade Cecconi and the season he just had for the D-backs in 2024, because entering the season, Slade was someone that I was intrigued by and was interested by, because in 2023, I did not think he had a bad year. I thought he had one of those seasons where it's like, you know what? He flashed some, showed some potential, had some things in his stuff that was like, okay, maybe we got something to work with, right? Those mid-90s on the fastball. Yes, the stats on the fastball weren't so good last year, but the slider, the stats were good on. So I was like, all right, the fastball, he throws it hard, and the slider mixing off of it actually has pretty good numbers, right? Hitters weren't too effective against it last year. Yes, it was a small sample size, but I was like, you never know. Maybe Slade could at least be a long reliever for the D-backs in 2024. Maybe he could be a number 5 starter that is decent. Like, I thought Slade had a chance to at least be a solid major leaguer. And I'm here to tell you that I just might be flat out wrong on that prognosis. After watching 2024, I'm not sure if Slade Cecconi is a major league pitcher because the 4.33 ERA in 2023, like I could live with that because I thought he showed flashes. He was definitely good at times, and I was excited for Slade entering 2024, but it kind of went sideways relatively quickly. Like he kind of fooled us entering the year because those first 2 outings he had, he made 2 starts where he looked really good. 6 innings, 2 earned runs against the Giants, and then 6 innings, 1 earned run against the Mariners. And it's like, oh, Slade is actually a good pitcher. That second start, 6 innings, 1 earned run, 8 Ks. And it's like, oh, Slade is a good pitcher. Then the next start against the Padres, 4.1 innings, 6 earned runs. But then against the Reds, 5.1 innings, 1 earned run. So he starts off 3 of his first 4 outings. He has 2 earned runs or less. He's pitching deep into ball games, at least a 6 inning in 3 of his first starts. He has that one blow up start against the Padres where you're like, okay, we'll take that away. But 3 of his first 4 starts, I feel really good about. And then after that, he just never finds his footing. He kind of goes into a tailspin spiral where he just struggles the rest of the season, and you never feel good about Slade ever again. After that 4th start he makes, Slade just ends up being pretty brutal for Arizona. And when you look at the stats, you really dive into the numbers tell you the same story. Slade probably is a guy who's not as good as the flashes that we saw in 2023 and definitely closer to the guy that we saw in 2024, and we shouldn't make any mistakes about it. This guy Slade is someone that I want to be in on, someone that I wanted to work out, and someone that I thought could be a good pitcher within the organization. I thought he could be someone that developed, especially with Brent Strom, right? I thought Slade was one of those guys that would fit perfectly in the Brent Strom system, and he would be able to extract all the goodness out of Slade, and that just never happened. And it's part of the reason why we saw Brent Strom fired this past season, because guys like Slade in their rookie season looked a lot worse in year number 2. And you just look at the numbers for Slade, and there's not really a lot that you can hang your hat on if you're him, because against right-handed batters, he was horrendous. 320 average allowed, 920 OPS allowed. Against lefties, still 800 OPS allowed. So it's not like he was really that good in the platoon splits. Starter versus reliever, he was pretty bad in both. He was actually way worse as a reliever. 18 earned runs in just 16 innings pitched coming out the pen this past year for the D-backs. Like, you just cannot do that. Runners in scoring position, absolutely horrendous. 359 average allowed, 1022 OPS. Like, when you try to find the numbers that Slade Cecconi thrived at or thrived in 2024, like, there's not really anything. There's not really much that you can say that he was good at outside of the first plate appearance, that first time through the order where Slade faced opposing batters. It's the one reason why we thought he could be a reliever for the D-backs, because when you pull up his numbers as a starter, the first time through the lineup, Slade was dominant this past year. 152 average and a 429 OPS. And so we thought, put that guy in the bullpen, he's going to be great because he faces 3 batters and that's all he needs. And he's fantastic when it's only the first time he faces someone. And so why wouldn't he be good out the pen when that's also the first time you would face someone? And you would think the logic would line up there, right? And it just did not. The logic did not make sense, because you look at his first plate appearance out the pen, 373 average allowed, 1233 OPS allowed. And so the numbers were elite first time through the order as a starter, but first time seeing these guys as a reliever, he gave up monster numbers. And so wasn't really much that you could take from Slade's season this past year and hang your hat on. The 4-seamer, slightly higher velo than last year, but hit at a much higher rate. The slider got crushed a lot more as well. Like the slider, at least in 2023, 36% whiff percentage, 23.9% put away percentage. Those numbers fell off a cliff in 2024. He just couldn't put guys away at the same rate with his secondary stuff as he did in 2023. And because of it, he struggled mightily this past season. And now entering next year, I'm like, yeah, we're probably done with this Slade Cecconi experiment. He's a good guy. It was a fun time, but I think we all know he's not long for the tooth in Arizona. And so, Slade, not a good season for you. And I don't think you have much of a future with Arizona. But if you're able to have a renaissance like a Ryan Nelson, because you never know, you could write these guys off after 2 years and then all of a sudden they turn it around, just like a Luke Weaver we see as well. So, right now, I'm out on Slade, but the door is always open for me to be back in on you. Now, that's it for this edition of the Locked On Diamondbacks podcast. Come back tomorrow for more Diamondbacks news coverage and insight. And as always, stay safe, stay healthy. Doses.